Today's Democratic Party is not as diverse as you would think. You have just a handful of liberals, as well as conservatives, and just a few real progressives, with no actual leftists. Spare maybe one or two. But the majority of the party consists of centrists, or more accurately, neoliberals. Being a neoliberal basically means you accept a tilted economy that favors huge corporations, Wall Street, and the wealthy and powerful at every turn by making sure they get massive tax cuts, less and less regulations and oversight, and more accumulation of concentrated wealth at the expense of the bottom 99% of income earners in this country, while at the same time making excuses as to why the working class, working families, and the poor can't have it better, deliberately undermining social programs and relief for workers and people living paycheck to paycheck who are constantly on the edge of being destitute. This regressive, outdated, trickle-down economic mindset is cloaked in a rigid posturing of cultural and socially progressive stances like acceptance of people of color, no brainer, LGBTQ people, and denouncing bigotry from right wingers, while at the same time doing little to nothing to effectively alleviate their struggles, turning their backs on unions, labor movements, low class organizations, usually for the sake of pleasing their donors, whose only interests are maximizing profit at every single opportunity, which especially includes ignoring the needs of the poor and working class. People everywhere of every stripe and every ideology tend to misunderstand the Democrats, especially Democrats themselves. However, this couldn't be more clearer listening to conservatives who never seem to shut up about Democrats. Democrats are everything in the book to Republican-esque conservatives. Liberals, socialists, communists, Marxists, fascists, anarchists, dangerous radicals, and weak, whiny children. The right can never get the Democrats properly defined. They tend to always be whatever the right needs them to be. So this goes out to the right wingers and conservative minded folk. Whatever your delusions are in regards to what you call the left means nothing when all you do is conflate various leftist ideologies, misrepresent positions you refuse to understand out of sheer convenience, and literally just make shit up. If you really think that these so-called socialists that you fearmonger about all the time are inclined to engage in or even advocate for political violence and encourage division like an authoritarian, or hell, actually have any real socialist policies at the forefront, I highly suggest you show me an example of them doing so in order to implement and obtain the policies that they advocate for. Because all I hear AOC, Bernie Sanders, Rashida Tlaib, Shahid Buttar, Ilhan Omar, Ro Khanna, Pramila Jayapal, Jamal Bowman, Katie Porter, and even Jeremy Corbyn and Jagmeet Singh fight for is peace and unity amongst citizens to collectively speak out so we can ultimately enact left of center policies that virtually every other first world country has some form of or another already, which assists the working class and poor. These few progressives highlight this glaring truth that countries like the US have embarrassingly failed to achieve said very popular policies yet, all due to widespread corporatism, crony corruption, and big money influencing elections and political campaigns, not to mention Washington as a whole. They point out how politics today disproportionately benefit the obscenely wealthy rather than the working class. I don't hear them screaming about seizing the means of production or abolishing private property or any radical post-capitalist narrative like that. Any ideology that requires violence or authoritarianism to implement is undesirable and should be rejected. What you hear, if you actually listen to them, is textbook progressivism and social democratism. Not socialism, not even really democratic socialism. A well-regulated capitalist system that focuses on working people rather than worsening income inequality by strengthening the social safety net and incorporating a progressive tax system as we saw around between 1945 and 1970, the golden age of economics. Of course, there are some that go further left than that, and their voices are definitely out there, but most aren't voting Democrat. They aren't voting at all, and if they are, it's third party. The least you can do is pay more attention and dismantle your biased ego to, at the very least, entertain varying perspectives from the left. Just be an honest actor. So if you pay close enough attention to the language of politicians, most like to dress up vague platitudes and cliches in order to give some lip service to ideas coming from the left, without actually taking a bold and principled stance for any clear positions. Some don't even go that far. Many will just downplay and dismiss certain positions outside of their purview in order to keep their donors happy by gaslighting the left and saying that change is too hard. These particular politicians only care about staying in power, making money, and winning their re-elections. If this wasn't true, then why haven't the American people seen a significant enough change when it comes to the most important issues we face, especially at times when Democrats have had the most power? Let's look at some polls. So this is according to Gallup. Several issues tie important 2020 election is the article. It's from January of 2020, so it's a little dated. But keep in mind, this is at the time when Bernie Sanders was the front runner. Okay, importance of issues to U.S. adults' votes in 2020 presidential election. I'm going to go over let's see, it says, now I'm going to read some of the issues that will probably be discussed in next year's presidential campaign. As I read each one, please tell me how important the candidates' positions on that issue will be in influencing your vote for president. Extremely important, very important, somewhat important, or not important. So these are all listed under extremely important and very important. Healthcare, 81%. 81% for healthcare. Extremely important and very important. If you remember back at the primaries, whenever healthcare came up, what was most memorable about the discussion? Medicare for all. The healthcare industry is ripping us off. They're milking us for every penny. And it's all profit motive. It's all incentivized by profit, maximizing profits. Next up, terrorism and national security, 80%. Boy, 9/11 sure scared the living daylights out of us for it to last this long, right? I think America is the biggest threat to itself. Next up, gun policy, 74%. Yeah, I mean, with how many shootings we have all the damn time, that makes sense. Education, 83%. 83%. Extremely important or very important. The economy, 84%. Why is that so high? If America has such a great economy, why is it such a big concern to people, to everyday voters? Why is that 84%? Immigration, 74%. TJ Kirk, the Amazing Atheist Fashion, made a very great video about immigration not too long ago. Climate change, 55%. Extremely important, very important. That is way, way too low. Abortion, 64%. Makes me think of that Bill Hicks segment. You're never going to get people united on abortion. There's never going to be a consensus. Such a ridiculous issue. 58%. The distribution of income and wealth in the U.S. 58%. Extremely important or very important. That's promising for sure. Federal budget deficit, 72%. I guess. Taxes, 69%. Race relations, 66%. This was back in January. I wonder what it looks like now. Nation's infrastructure, 74%. When was the last time our nation undertook such a giant infrastructure project? The 50s? Foreign affairs, 64%. Trade with other nations, 68%. Where I'm going with this is you don't see any Democrats taking any hardline stances on any of these issues whatsoever. Not even Republicans, for the most part. I mean, sure, some of these issues to fearmonger and stir up the base, play into people's fears, because that's the best strategy Republicans have. That's why they're a lot more in lockstep than the Democrats. But what's ironic about corporate politicians worried more about their re-elections than any issues is that if they simply work with their constituents, the American voter in the community they're supposed to represent, they would stand with them instead of making excuses as to why they can't get what they want because they decided taking corporate lobbyist donations and PAC money is more important and easier than making a real change and actually standing with the people that voted you in. If you have the people on your side, then you are a true force to be reckoned with. For a long time, I thought that Democrats were fighting valiantly, but were just overwhelmed too often by the oligarchy and the Republicans. Then I saw that the Democrats were losing fights that they should have been winning and figured they must simply be weak and ineffectual. Then I kept seeing them backing off without putting up a fight at all, and I decided they were gutless cowards. Finally, I noticed that enough of them keep voting with or aligning with the Republicans, making sure the Republicans more or less win every fight, and that the Democrats keep starting from a center position, then kept bargaining to the right. Eventually, after enough of that, it became impossible to ignore the only conclusion that actually fits the facts. The Democrats are not overmatched. They are not weak. They are not cowards. They are complicit. And that is why I am not a Democrat. I refuse to be complicit in a rigged, two-tier, kleptocratic, plutocratic, oligarchic duopoly masquerading as a representative democratic republic, whatever you want to call it. I'm tired of the US operating in an electoral system where you constantly have to vote against someone or something rather than voting for something. I'm tired of the media and American public ignoring the activity of crooks like Pelosi and Schumer, giving Trump a $4 trillion slush fund to give out to all his criminal, corrupt corporate CEO, Wall Street, and billionaire buddies with no oversight, no strings attached, but then turning around and telling us endlessly that Trump must be stopped at all costs, while he is given an increase in the military budget by $80 billion, and he still supposedly works for Putin? How exactly does that work? How exactly is that resistance again? When it came to those polls earlier from Gallup, one of the biggest things I need everyone to take away from that is whenever someone claims, how are you going to pay for it? We can't afford that. Like, how are you going to pay for it? This is why. We can give hundreds of billions, trillions in tax cuts to the wealthy. Taxes go into the economy. They circulate. The money keeps flowing. Giving them giant handouts with no strings attached, cutting their taxes, and then we turn around like, oh, look, we have no money for these services. We have no money for healthcare, education, or anything like that. Yeah, the Democrats and Republicans are really keeping you in mind. I just want people to stop struggling and dying because small groups of rich people prioritize money and profits over human lives.